Let's be honest, even when you love a place, there are probably going to be plenty of things that drive you absolutely up a wall about it. And as much as I wish that weren't true about Virginia, and especially Northern Virginia, it is. Let's talk about 6 things that really drive me crazy about living here. There will be no sugarcoating, so get ready. The weather in Northern Virginia is good for about 2 seasons out of the year. Sometimes that ends up being about half of the year, and other times it's just a couple of months. It really depends on what the weather decides to do on any given year. So why do I say that the weather is so awful? Well, the humidity is probably the biggest reason. Having spent most of my time growing up in a very dry place, moving to Northern Virginia was like walking into a wet blanket every time I walked out of the house. And I'll be real with you, that feeling hasn't changed. Using Arlington as an example for the general region, because it's really not that different from the rest of the area, the average humidity throughout the year is 64%. That's pretty wild. Not only does it make it really sticky and gross, but it also makes the extreme heat and cold of this region feel even more extreme than it can already get. Which leads me to my next point. The temperatures around here can get pretty high and pretty low, probably in contrast to what you might expect. The average highs in the summer hover somewhere around the high 80s, while the winters have averages that tend to be around the high 20s and low to mid 30s. Even though these are the averages, it's not unheard of to have days that are significantly hotter or colder. And again, thanks to the humidity, it just feels way worse than what the thermometer tells you. On top of the extreme temperatures and humidity, the other thing that you'll have to contend with is rain and freezing rain in the winter. I'm perfectly fine with the rain when I get to stay in, but the second I have to go out in it, I'm done. If you love rain, this could potentially be a huge win for you. As much as tourists and business visitors bring a lot of money into the local economy, they can also bring a lot of extra chaos. The areas closest to DC are where you're going to generally find a lot of the impacts of tourism. These impacts include the fairly obvious things like extra traffic generated by tour buses and extra riders on the metro. Impacts from tourism also include things that are a little less obvious, like increased housing costs due to homes being used for short-term rentals, as well as increased costs for dining out and amenities due to the increased demand. And tourism isn't the only thing bringing folks to Northern Virginia. Plenty of business and government travelers alike also make their way here thanks to the many corporate and federal headquarters in the area. Most of the impacts from both groups are felt more in the Northern Virginia regions closer to DC, but they're also felt further out as well. This area's traffic is something that I make sure everyone knows about, even if they're just visiting. The reason for this is that traffic can get so incredibly bad and throw a lot of wrenches into plans if you're not prepared for it. As an example, if you're picking a place to live because you want to have only a 10-minute commute, but then realize once you've gotten all settled in that thanks to traffic it's now a 20 to 30-minute commute, that's a really unpleasant surprise that I don't think anyone truly wants. Not only is the traffic bad, but it lasts for a long period of time pretty much every workday. Morning rush hours tend to start around 6 or 7 a.m. and then go until 10 or 11. Then, in the evening, you can expect rush hour traffic to start from around 2 or 3 p.m. and on an especially rough day, sometimes even 1 o'clock, and go until 6 or 7 and sometimes 8 p.m. Even on days when people aren't commuting back and forth into and out of DC, you're probably still very likely to run into some sort of traffic along your way, whether it's a crash or disabled vehicle, or even maybe some event that's going on and has roads closed. The commuting universe really just is sometimes not looking out for us. And as much as it's possible to find alternate routes to get where you're going, even those are pretty likely to get backed up because depending on where you're going, there are only a limited number of routes available to get there. Tied very closely to traffic is parking. Depending on where you are in Northern Virginia, it's going to be a beast to find parking. A lot of places, especially in neighborhoods as you get closer to DC, have permit parking. This means that unless you have a permit during certain hours of the day, you're very likely to get a ticket. Although I understand the logic behind this, limited space and minimal desire to have lots of random cars showing up and sitting for long periods of time, it makes it really hard to find parking to get to what you're doing. Outside of parking in neighborhoods, There also tends to be a smaller number of parking lots, and those that you do find tend to be pretty small. There are parking garages, but they can get pretty full depending on the time of day that you're going. There is sometimes street parking available, but this is usually in high demand, also known as most of it is taken. And I really hope that you're good at parallel parking because the spots are pretty much made for smaller cars, and somehow people find a way to end up parking over the lines, making the spaces even smaller than before. This means that you're going to have to fit into an extra tight spot. Speaking of small spaces, this area does not have a ton of space to work with, meaning that houses and other living spaces like apartments tend to be pretty small. This is great if you don't want to walk too far from one side of the house to the other side when you're looking for something. But if that's not your style and you're looking for more space, expect to pay a premium for it. Even if you get extra space inside, you still probably aren't going to have a lot of space outside. Residential lots in Northern Virginia, especially those close to DC, tend to be pretty small, and it's not uncommon to have the house itself take up a good chunk of the available space. This makes for close neighbors, whether you like it or not. As with getting more space inside, if you're looking for a larger lot, you can find it for a price. The good news is that as you move further from DC, you tend to get a little more space, but you'll also have to contend with a potentially longer drive. Life always comes with trade-offs. Cost of living is a real consideration in Northern Virginia thanks to the higher than average amount that you will spend just to live here. You may already have the budget where it's not going to affect you much, but I think it's still important to know in order to make an informed decision. The higher cost of living comes into play in pretty much all aspects of life in Northern Virginia. Whether it's getting groceries, going out to eat, paying utilities, or any number of other parts of your daily life, just expect to pay a fair bit more than you would in plenty of other places. For better or worse, one of the places where you'll really feel the impact of the area's cost of living is for your housing costs. Housing in the Northern Virginia region just costs more on average, with houses easily topping $500,000, $1 million, and even several $1 million. That alone is going to cost you more. But then, when you also factor in property taxes that are even 1 or 2 cents on the assessed value, the amount you pay up front and over time adds up really quickly. Just a 1-cent tax per $100 of assessed value means that you'd be looking at property taxes of around $10,000 per year on a $1 million house. On top of that, insurance rates, while not too crazy, do tend to be a little bit higher in the area as well. On their own, each of these things isn't too bad. Add them together though, and you really start to see the impact to your bottom line. If you've decided that you're fully capable of conquering the challenges of this area, check out the next video where I talk about some great spots to relocate in Northern Virginia.